Welcome back to a new tips and tricks video for Hell Let Loose, guys. As you might have noticed, one does not simply walk around and shoot enemies in the face in this game. On the contrary, you might have games where you are getting shot over and over from seemingly nowhere. Finding or even seeing the enemy takes some getting used to in Hell Let Loose. In this video I will share 4 tips with you to help you find the enemy. These tips are ranked from easiest to the most complex to implement in your playstyle. I think all new players should watch this guide because it will save you lots of frustration. So the first tip is to don't walk around and look for enemies. Hell Let Loose is not Battlefield or some other traditional shooter, and locating enemies is actually one of the key objectives in the game, so that's why it's actually quite hard to find enemies. You don't just stumble into enemies and shoot them, because they will be lying in a hedgerow and one-shot killing you, as I'm sure you're familiar with. So for example, you want to stay in the shadows, because you will stick out a lot more in the sun. If you stay in the shadows next to a hedgerow, scan the horizon, make sure you're stealthy and camouflaged, because moving gives away your position, which is also the case for the enemy. So if you are moving, you can see the enemy and they can see you. So what you want to do before you move out is stay in cover, scan the horizon, for example aim, hold shift so you can see a little bit further, and make sure it's absolutely clear before you move out. This is very different from other games, so it takes some getting used to, but as you know, the enemies are well camouflaged, they can kill you in one shot, so you definitely don't want to walk around and just look for enemies to kill them. And if you do happen to see an enemy, make sure to ping them with middle mouse button so your teammates can help you take this enemy out. So stick close to your squad lead, listen to his callouts, because your squad is shooting and looking in a certain direction, so it also gives you a bit of a better understanding where the enemy might be. And as far as other things, listen to gunshots, listen to incoming fire, and what most people do, you can actually change the foliage settings in the graphical options to low, so all the bushes and grass and stuff is less detailed, so it's easier to see enemies. In a nutshell, don't walk around, stay in cover until you go to the next position, make sure it's clear, and you will definitely start seeing a lot more enemies. So before I get into my next tip, let me quickly introduce myself. So my channel is GoudaGamer and I focus on content for Hell Let Loose. So mostly I make tips and tricks videos, show nice gameplay and also include news about the game. So if you're interested in staying up to date regarding Hell Let Loose, maybe consider subscribing to my channel. Anyway, let's get into the next tip. So the second tip is to use your map, because other games don't expect it as much from you, but the map is a very useful tool in Hell Let Loose. By default it's located all the way across the keyboard at the M key, but I highly recommend moving it up to the F or G key so you can constantly open it without moving your left hand. So apart from the friendly pings, you can see a lot of other stuff on the map. So there's friendly markers, they can be for a whole bunch of things. For example, infantry markers, tanks, enemy outposts and garrisons. This gives you a lot of information on where to look and you can expect the enemy from. So these friendly markers, they're all placed by other officers, maybe your own squad leader and also the commander. And even if teammates don't mark objectives, look for landmarks. So there's bunkers, you can see little canals, you can see all kinds of stuff. And based on where the enemy's strong point is or their sector is, you can kind of estimate their location. Because as a rule of thumb, you can expect people to walk between the objectives in a straight line. That's just what most people do. And there's usually 1 or 2 squads flanking from the side. So if you use these landmarks and kind of predict where they're coming from, that can actually go a long way. And the same goes for looking at your teammates, because you can actually see the direction they're facing on the map. So if you're a gunshot, you see your teammates looking in a certain direction, you can pretty accurately assess where the enemy would be, approximately. So the third tip is to communicate with your squad and team. I mean, I repeat it in every Hell Let Loose video I make, but communication and using a mic is very important in this game. One of the reasons is that your squad leader actually has binoculars as the only class in the squad. So they can look a lot further than your regular soldier and then ping enemies for you. This is very useful for knowing where the enemy is. And apart from your squad chat and pinging together, because if everyone pings it's much easier to find enemies obviously, you can also use proximity chat if there's incoming fire. Use your compass below in the screen to call out to your teammates around you, but also you can ask other people around you if they know where the enemy is, and if they give you the location on the compass, it's much easier. I mean, if you just start playing the game, you just only see grass, hedgerows, bullets going into your head. I mean, it's very hard to get a bit of an understanding what's going on around you. And if you just talk with proximity chat, which is V by default on the keyboard, you can actually get a lot of intel from the people around you. Another thing that's also good to know is if you see something coming out of the sky with a parachute and it's not marked on your map, so something that your commander is dropping, it might be something that the enemy is putting in your territory. And this could either be an airhead, so a spawn point behind your lines so the enemy can attack you from behind, or it might be supplies being dropped, so the enemies want to build a garrison in your territory. Please relay this information to your team, because it's very important, but it also shows you where the enemy could be coming from next, so pay attention to it. So my last tip is effective garrison and OP placement. Because as you might know by now, garrisons are spawn points for your team and outposts are spawn points for your squad, but this is not their only function. They actually can also show you where the enemy is coming from. Because they glow red when there's enemies nearby, even garrisons they can get completely locked when the enemy is very nearby. But the interesting thing is you can use this to your advantage. So this means that if you place your garrisons and outposts in tactical locations around the objectives, as you can see in the gameplay footage in the background, you can actually assess where the enemy is attacking from, and it can give you a lot of intel. But this requires a lot of communication with the other squad leaders and the rest of your team, so that's why I place this in the last tip, because you need some proper comms for this to work. So ideally you want to put 3 garrisons around the point, so they need to be quite far away from each other, like a full block on the map. So pay attention to that. But anyway, I really hope these tips helped you. I mean, it takes some time to learn Hell Let Loose. And if you enjoyed these tips, you can consider leaving a like or maybe subscribing to my channel, as more tips and tricks videos will follow. But anyway, I really appreciate you watching the video and see you in the next one, guys.